All right, we are live for a special edition of The Old Man of the Three, presented by Cash App, brought to you by 342 Productions. We are joined by our friend Tyrese Haliburton from the great state of Iowa, joining us from the great state of Iowa right now. Tyrese, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate you having me.
Tyrese, what do you think? Tyrese, what do you think of the shades?
I like the look. It's a league. That's a league fits worthy look.
You know, yesterday when I went on First Take, I wore shades on live national television for the first time. And today I decided, well, actually, this will be my second time wearing shades on the pod because of the Matisse Bible episode. I had to wear shades because I had cried so much that day because it was the day after I retired. Guys, we got a lot to get to. There's a lot to unpack in game one. So I just want to start off with you, Tyrese. Like, what direction do you want to go? Give me some early thoughts here about either the series or about your impressions of game one. What did you see?
I think the thing that stood out to me the most, without overreacting, is that Boston showed again how consistent they are defensively. I think the physicality and the speed at which they play with is a lot for even Golden State to handle. I think that this might be one of the most elite defenses that Golden State has faced in this whole dynasty of their franchise. This is probably one of their biggest defensive challenges, and I'm really intrigued to see how they counteract this going into game two.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great place to start because I think we can eventually get to the fourth quarter. Of course, we'll talk about Horford and Jaylen Brown. There's some potential matchup stuff that I'm very curious about, but I think we should start there with the Boston defense. And let's start actually in the first quarter, because I, for one, was shocked by two things. Number one, just an absolute terrible job by the Celtics early on of picking up Steph Curry, pointing when no one was on him, no one going to him. And then, of course, these little drag screens that he was coming down into, the big being all the way back, easy free screen. Like there was a little bit of blown coverage early on, which I think was a little shocking. And obviously, like Steph, amazing player, fantastic player, one of the best players ever. But they didn't do a good job of having awareness on the one player you have to have awareness on all the time. And that, to me, early on was a little shocking for that defense.
Yeah, no question. I think, like you said, a lot of point switching. I think teams tend to send two at him, which allows him to share it, get Draymond that dunk for him to yell at the crowd, or get somebody to get somebody else going. I thought it was just a lot of miscommunication, especially in transition. A lot of times you saw Marcus Smart pointing like, how is nobody picking him up? But I thought they weathered that storm well moving forward. I thought, what were they down at the end of the first? 4 points?
4. Yeah, they were tied. They were tied. They tied it up, and then the Warriors closed with 4 to end the first quarter, but it was close.
Yeah, like, I don't know. If Steph Curry hits 6 threes and you're down 4 in the first quarter, I think you're good. On the road, you're good. Like, I think you don't. Like, there's not a lot to worry about moving forward.
So one observation that I had, and leading up to this game, whether it was on when we did finals preview or whether it was on the shows I was on this week, I talked a lot about the Celtics and their switch frequency. You know, they were number one in the league in switch frequency this season. They were number one in the league, or number 2 in the league in the playoffs in switch frequency. That's on everything. And then they were number 1 in the playoffs in switch frequency on direct high pick and rolls. And so early on, they were in drop coverage, and the big was really, really far back, and they went to the wired. And I'm so glad Marcus Smart was the guy that was wired last night. They went to the wired, and I'm butchering the quote here, but he basically was talking to the big, and he's like, look, on those drag screens, when they set the pick higher up, you still have to be higher up, even if you're in the drop. My job is to funnel him into you and get him inside the 3-point line. I, for one, look, I get that you have to switch up coverages here and there, but I, for one, was a little shocked that they stuck with that drop coverage for so long. In fact, they basically ran strictly drop coverage through 3 quarters, and I have some amazing stats on this. So on the drop coverage through 3 quarters, the Warriors averaged 1.9 points per possession on Curry drop coverage plays, 94% effective field goal percentage. And then in the fourth quarter, they mostly went without that. There was a little bit of blitzing. They were up not at the level, not a full blitz. They were up at the level, and then there was some switching. And I think that's really what disrupted that flow for Steph. And I don't know that you can ever play 4 quarters of drop coverage against Steph Curry.
I have a question for both of you because, Tyrese, you were tweeting about this last night too. What is the argument in theory? We've talked about drop coverage a ton on the show with different guys. What is the argument in theory to play drop coverage, to start the game playing drop coverage against a team like this?
JJ, you go ahead.
Well, so there's 2 things you can do here. So you can switch, right? Or you can be up either in a soft blitz or a full-on blitz, okay? So one of the things that we've talked about a bunch, especially within the Mavs series and the Nuggets series, the Warriors have seen that blitz so many times. They've seen that so many times. And what happens? They throw the ball to Draymond Green in the short roll. They throw the ball to Kevon Looney in the short roll. And that guy on the backside has 2 guys. There's a guy in the wing. There's a guy in the corner. The guy is called the X-Man. The defender is called the X-Man. What Golden State does so well, that guy's back is looking at that short roller. He's got 2 guys, and his job is to take the first pass out. He can't sink all the way to the block to prevent that back cut because he won't be able to get to that first pass if it goes to the wing. What Golden State does, they almost always cut that guy out of the corner. Andrew Wiggins gets dunks. Gary Payton II has had a bunch of dunks in this playoff run on that play. So to me, blitzing consistently, which is what we saw Denver do in game 1, and I called that out. You cannot do that consistently against this team. They are too smart and too good. They've seen it too much. They will exploit that over and over. And this is where I think the Celtics have a real advantage. They have mobile bigs that potentially could switch exclusively, but also just be higher up so that when Steph comes off, if it is a clean screen, when he comes off, there's a man there to contest, and potentially he doesn't allow that short roller to get behind him. Now that's, Tyrese, you know this from playing. That's about as hard of an ask you can make for a big guy, especially when they're setting that screen so far out.
Yeah, no question. I think, okay, when you get to the finals, like no matter what, the 2 teams that get to the finals, they got high-level coaches, right? So the adjustments that were being made last night were ridiculous, like throughout the game on both sides. I think what Boston did a good job of was, like you said, they started in a drop coverage. Well, let's just get this out the way right now. A drop coverage from Al Horford is a high-level drop coverage versus a drop coverage from, respectfully, Daniel Tice is different. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a completely different drop coverage. Like, Al Horford is a high-level defender, and he's always been this high-level defender for years. So it's different when you're doing it with him, even versus like a Robert Williams. I trust Al Horford in that drop more than I trust anybody else. I thought they did a really good job getting later in the game. Like you said, they switched it up, but I thought that they could do that because they start with the 2 bigs where they've had a lot of success with, Robert Williams and Al Horford, but they went small late in the game. I thought that was their best lineup, and I thought that was reflected, stats wise, when they went the 2 J's, Horford, Derrick White, who had a really good game last night, and then Pritchard and Smart play. They kind of switched halfway through the 4th. I thought that was a really good lineup for them to switch things up and force Golden State into having to pound the ball and play one-on-one, and that's hard to do against such an elite defense like Boston. So I thought that making that adjustment in the 4th really helped propel them, to take that big jump in the 4th.
I was going to ask you both about the going small adjustment because there's an obvious sort of change in the game when it happens. The Celtics have had a lot of success with that all playoffs. There's no way to know for sure what their game plan was, going into the game. They're not going to tell us that specifically. But do you guys think that was an adjustment to what was happening, or this was always a thought of like, when it gets to the 4th, this is our best lineup, we're going to basically, unleash it on them, and it worked? I mean, either way it worked, but like, is that an in-game thing, or is that a thing that was always sort of planned?
Well, I think it's more, it is an in-game thing. I don't know. I can't know Ime Udoka's strategy for starting drop coverage. I think to Tyrese's first point, when he talked about the Boston Celtics defense, and I know we're harping on this, but we've talked about this so many times during the playoffs. What makes this defense so unique is its versatility. It is that you can start the game in a drop coverage with a Robert Williams II, and then later on you can have him switch. It is the fact that you can play Al Horford, as Tyrese said, in a high-level drop, and then later on you can switch. I just want to throw in, we're going to talk about Al Horford a ton. I just want to anecdotally throw in 2 stats for you about Al Horford in these playoffs defensively. So he's number 1 in the playoffs in total shots contested, and he's number 1 in the playoffs in field goal percentage allowed. In other words, when he is guarding on the ball and he contests a shot, he's giving up the lowest field goal percentage in the playoffs. Like Tyrese can't. I mean, you nailed it. His drops, his switches, his body positioning. He's not the quickest guy. He just knows how to play that position so well and play that coverage so well. So I think being able to switch it up in game is what makes this Celtics defense so good. Tommy, I mean, what are your superlatives for Al Horford? Because we saw an incredible performance last night.
He's just steady. I mean, we haven't even talked about the shots he's hitting in the fourth quarter. And he doesn't need to, shoot the ball 20 times a game to have a successful offensive performance, but he is everything you guys have just said about defense. And then when there's 5 minutes left in the game and it's a tie game and he gets a swing pass and he's open for 3, he's going to hit it. And it just as he's done it. He did it in Milwaukee. He did it last round. He's doing it now. And it's amazing to see. I mean, it's amazing. It's not surprising, but it's amazing to see.
It really is. And again, I love when the eye test and the analytics, when they align and you're like, oh, okay, my eyes aren't lying to me. And my eyes, the whole playoffs, even when I'm wearing shades, my eyes the whole playoffs have said, Blood of DePanta said JJ looked like he only watches DiCaprio movies.
No one.
I got to be honest with you.
Nolan movies, but close.
I take that as a compliment. Like it doesn't hurt my feelings. But my eye test has said, oh, Al Horford's been awesome in these playoffs. He's been awesome. And we talked about the defensive numbers. He's second overall in playoffs in 3-point percentage. He's the only guy in this playoffs across the league, all 16 teams, that is shooting over 50% from the field and over 45% from 3. His shooting has been outstanding. And on top of that, he's been amazing in the fourth quarter. He's been the second most efficient scorer in the playoffs in the fourth quarter. The guy who's first, by the way, who I think we should now kind of segue into, is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown led that comeback at the start of the fourth quarter and we'll get to Tatum, but on an off shooting night for Tatum, Jaylen Brown had 10 points and 5 assists in the fourth quarter. So it was the scoring, but it was also the playmaking. And when we talk about all of the shots that he hit, right, 9 for 12 from 3 in the fourth quarter, to me, it was Brown. And then later on, it was Tatum. It was those two guys' ability to break down the defense, draw a second help defender, and then Boston gets into their swing stuff. And they're just literally, I think 8 of the 9 threes were directly off of a kick out, like dribble penetration kick out. And Jaylen Brown led that charge. And he's been the most efficient scorer in the fourth quarter. He leads the entire playoffs in points in the fourth quarter. Like, we think about Tatum as a superstar, but Tyrese, I don't know that we're giving Jaylen Brown enough credit for how good he's been in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously both of them are amazing. Both of them are, stars in this league. Both all-stars in this league. I think Brown's going to be huge in this series, and I think he showed it last night. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to overreact to Jayson Tatum having a bad game. He's had, I feel like one game like this in every series, it feels like, but he always responds. He's a superstar, so he'll figure it out. But I will say that I think Wiggins is the best defender he's seen this whole playoffs in terms of athleticism, speed. Like, I feel like Wiggins is going to give him more problems than most defenders that he's seen.
Wow, that is a hot take.
That's a hot take, but I believe it.
You think Wiggins is better than PJ Tucker and Drew Holiday?
Okay, he's not better than Drew Holiday, but he's longer though. He is longer. He's longer though.
I like the pick, Tyrese. Just go with it.
I'm rolling with it. I don't care.
I like it.
I'm rolling.
I don't agree, but I like the fact that you said it.
So I'm going to go back and look, and I'm glad you brought this up. And look, I'm going to go back and look, and we're going to look at the Wiggins numbers on Tatum throughout these games of the series. And I'm not knocking the guy's defense, but again, there was Wiggins slowed down Luka. Luka shot 51% when he was the primary defender. And last night, my observation, and I'm not saying Andrew Wiggins didn't do a good job, because he did do a good job. Tatum missed 3 or 4 wide open threes, feet set. He had Steph and Poole on him on a mismatch. He threw up some bullshit, trying to draw like when he's at his spot at 12 feet, just shoot over the top of those guys. He had the rush shot. I believe it was the end of the second quarter where it was like in that gray area. You can't really get a 2-for-1. Do you hold it all the way down till it gets under 10? And he cut to the foul line and took a fall away with like 14 seconds. So, like, to me, I talk about this all the time with Tatum. Tom, you co-sign this. It comes down to like decision making with him. And I didn't, other than a few shots, I didn't think he took bad shots last night. I didn't think Wiggins necessarily took him out of his game. And then when you look at the assist numbers, that's what the decision making comes down to. A low turnover night, 2 turnovers, and 13 assists in his first finals game, which is an NBA record for a debut in the finals.
I have a question for both of you guys about Jaylen in particular and his skill set. So they're down 12, 11 minutes to go, which is when he sort of starts to cook. And the first couple shots he hit are contested. One's a deep 2, another one's a deep 3, but they're not easy looks. And the shots that he's one of probably the only guys in the league that could even get off, much less hit. What do you think it is about, with how he's built and his skill set in general, like when he's on, how should you defend Jaylen Brown? Because it does feel, JJ, to your point, Terry, to your point about him being a superstar, there's not much. I'm not really sure what the Warriors were supposed to do with some of those shots.
Yeah. I mean, I've guarded him a little bit in the playoffs, and people on Twitter are just killing this guy's ball handling. I think it's more like the ball handling in a crowd. Sometimes it's befuddling, but the guy clearly has a handle. The pull up he hit in the third, I don't know if it was the third or the fourth, but he was ISO'd at the top and he went left and he used a crab dribble to then get back to his step back, and he shot an 18-footer and swished it. Like, that's elite level shot creation. Like, he's able to create shots. Tyree, have you guarded him at all? Because like when I watch him play, I'm like, I know he made that shot going left, but I'm like, the guy wants to get right. Like everything is all shifty. It's all to get to his right hand. Am I wrong on that?
No, he's all trying to get to his right. And I mean, he's strong too, to where like when he does get that Poole switch or gets the Steph switch, I feel like he's like that's what he wants. You know what I'm saying? I felt like Golden State switched a little bit more than I thought they would have going into last night. They were willing to switch. It kind of felt like everything between the guards and the wings. So, but like you said, I think like he is getting the second defender versus JT's getting the primary defender. So I feel like JB is going to have a great series for them to win. And I think he had a good game last night. Like you said, he made tough shots last night, like really tough shots. Like the left-hand pound dribble to the step back when he got Draymond on the switch. I rewinded it like 3 times. I was like,
yeah, that's the play I'm talking about. Yeah, that's a tough
move. It's a tough move.
It's a tough move. You call it a pound dribble, I call it a crab dribble, but whatever. It's
pound. Get to the and then
it's you dribble and step with the same side. Like it's
you call it a crab.
Move. I call it but I guess you call it a pound dribble. That's what Jimmy and I called it, but maybe it's called something else.
I've never heard it called that. That's tough.
Do you guys think so? Our friend Nate Jones was talking about this morning on Twitter about what the Warriors need to do defensively, and one of the things he said was he thinks they need to muck it up a little bit, like how Kyle did and the Heat did toward the end of that series, where it's just like get on the ground and kind of throw them off their game a little bit. Are there other adjustments, either that or other things you think that they should be the Warriors should be thinking about for game 2? Because I think we can all agree, like Tyrese just said, like Tatum's not going to shoot like that every night. I don't know that he's going to go for 30 every night, but he's also going to play better. And so it does feel a little bit disconcerting, if you're a Warriors fan, where you're like, these guys came in and beat us at home with our all-world player, not really giving us much.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be regression of all things, but to the point about the 3-point shooting for the Celtics, they were 9 for 12 in the fourth. It wasn't like they weren't shooting well prior to that. They were 12 for 29 going into the fourth quarter. That's 41%. Like, they were having a good shooting night. Marcus Smart, Derrick White, Peyton Pritchard, like, they were already shooting the ball well prior to that fourth quarter. And to your question about Nate's comments, I think some of this is personnel, though, right? Because when we talk about guys that muck it up, right, we're talking about the Kyle Lowrys, we're talking about the PJ Tuckers, we're talking about Dylan Brooks, we're talking about Marcus Smart, right? These are the sort of Patrick Beverly. Outside of Draymond, who's that guy for the Warriors? Who's that guy that plays that way? Because even going back to Jaylen Brown,
is it someone who hasn't played that much?
Potentially, it could be Gary Payton II. Yeah, it could be him. But outside of, like, so Jaylen Brown won that matchup with Klay Thompson last night. That's a key matchup throughout this series, right? That's a matchup. Peyton Pritchard, if we're talking like a matchup of Peyton Pritchard and Jordan Poole, two guys that come off the bench, Peyton Pritchard absolutely won that matchup last night. Like, so maybe, I don't think Poole's that guy. Maybe it's Otto Porter. Maybe it's Iguodala. I don't know. Maybe it's those two guys, because both those guys were really, really good last night. And obviously Iggy only played, I think, 12 minutes, but maybe it's those guys. Tyrese, do you see anything to that comment about the ability to sort of muck it up against the Celtics team?
Well, no, like you said, I think it's Draymond. I think you're missing Gary Payton. I think he has that capability as well, especially in guard play. But like you said, like they lost key matchups. Like Jordan Poole can't lose that matchup to Peyton Pritchard. Like he can't lose that matchup for them to be successful. And I don't know if they have another guy to truly muck things up. I think Draymond is that guy, but they didn't really guard. Like in the fourth, it was obvious. Like anybody could tell. Like they didn't guard the perimeter the way they wanted to. They shot. I mean, in Boston, credit to them, they hit shots. But I think that's where the game was won for Boston is. Obviously, like they were scoring the ball well, and then I thought Golden State kind of looked frantic offensively to where, Boston's getting stops. Like if you're not scoring, how do you weather that storm of them hitting so many shots? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I feel like people are very, very much like defense wins championships, get stops, but like if you don't score, you're not gonna win. So like you gotta score. Like it's just not good enough.
Yeah, no, it's a valid point. And the one guy we really haven't talked about that we should mention when we talk, potentially another guy that does muck it up a little bit, not to the level that Marcus Smart does, and that's Derrick White. He had an outstanding game last night, hit 5 threes, really has struggled throughout the playoffs in threes. In his first 15 games, he made 10 threes, but over the last 3 games, he's made 11. So if you're the Celtics, by the way, Tommy, when we did our live show post-trade deadline, we mentioned this trade, as potentially a big thing because we talked about this Celtics defense and like the more switchable parts, the more non-target players you add to this defense, the tougher it gets. And I thought he was great last night. I mean, he was a plus 25.
He's been great since he had his kid. In the Miami series, he's been amazing.
It's like the Fred VanVleet thing with Toronto.
Yeah.
He's a huge. Even in Game 6, they lost in the Miami series. He was awesome in that. My hot take, which I've said to you before, is that deal is going to go down. Them dumping Schroeder and Cantor and adding him is going to go down as one of the great deadline moves of the last 15, 20 years, especially if they win. If they win it,
they win it all.
No one talked about it, but it's obvious when you look at the before and after with everything with them efficiency wise and their record and everything like that.
Yeah. I want to move on to some Warriors stuff real quick. I do want to shout out Marcus Smart. I know Steph had a big night, but according to some stats I saw today, he guarded Steph on 29 possessions and he gave up 8 points. 2 of those were threes when he was the primary defender, and then he hit that little runner over him in the second half. And he had a great shooting night. And I know he didn't play but 3 minutes in the fourth quarter, but when he came back in, he made a big shot. So he had a great night. On the Warriors side, so a positive. Because obviously Steph had a big night, but a positive for them I thought was Andrew Wiggins on the offensive side of the ball. He had an efficient night, 20 points, 8 for 15 from the floor. the matchup that the Celtics started with was Robert Williams II on Wiggins. So a lot of times it was Wiggins who was setting the screen on Steph and then either getting Steph open or then being able to play in space. And we saw that a lot in the Dallas series when they would use Luka as the screener because he was guarding Wiggins and then Wiggins was able to attack. So I don't know if Boston switches that matchup up, but that's a guy that could potentially help swing this series in the Warriors' favor.
I am very on top of what we're talking about with Golden State. I am very curious for them offensively. I mean, I texted you guys and I was like, man, I think Steph. It's like the rotations are off. Like Steph needs to start the second, start the fourth. But they've played that way the whole year. The more I look at it, and I feel like a lot of Steph's misses were short, just probably because of the way Boston's guarding them and their physicality. Like it's like that's a lot to ask for from a guy, to consistently hit shots, with the way Boston was playing. But I'm very, very curious to see, with Boston going small and playing 4 guards, I'm switching everything. And well, Robert Williams does. He usually guards the 4. With most teams, he's going to guard the 4. He's going to float and go block shots. Well, you can't do that against the Warriors because they're just going to throw it to Draymond. He's going straight to the DHO with Steph. And now there's no help. Or DHO with Poole, DHO with Klay. There's no help. They're rising up and shooting it. And now they got open looks. I'm very curious to see now if Robert Williams is not in the game and if Horford or Marcus Smart is guarding Draymond, taking away his roles, when is Draymond going to look at the hoop? Like, this is an elite defense, JJ. Like an elite defense. You cannot go out there with only 4 guys who are willing to shoot the ball. I feel like Draymond has to be aggressive for them to have any success in my mind. Like, if he doesn't look at the hoop, it's just really frustrating to me. Why is he not shooting the ball?
Yeah, it's a point I wanted to bring up, and that's just how they're guarding him. And they're just basically using his guy as that help defender, 5th defender. They're ignoring him when he's on the 3-point line. And a couple things there. Like, he ended up taking 12 shots, which I think is the highest he's taken in these playoffs, potentially in a long time. 0 for 4 from 3. And other than that, he had a very Draymond Green game. 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, fouled out, got into it with the refs. It was a very Draymond-esque performance. But they've got to figure out, and he's smart enough, and he's done this, and he's been guarded this way enough. They've got to figure out ways to use that against the Celtics. And I always go back, whenever I see a guy being guarded like that, I always go back to Ben Simmons in the half court. Ben Simmons in the half court was so good at grabbing the ball, and Draymond is too, grabbing the ball and just taking it to those DHOs. And then as his guy comes up to potentially contest Steph or to potentially contest Klay, then all of a sudden you get Draymond on the roll. Now he's got the 4-on-3, and now Draymond's picking you apart. Right. That's the strength of Draymond Green. It's the same thing as Ben Simmons in the half court. It would be nice, to your point, it would be really nice if he knocks down a couple trays just to get the Celtics thinking a little bit, right?
Yes.
Just to get them thinking. But I think that, look, how that aspect of the half-court offense materializes for Golden State will be a key factor in this series. Draymond Green in the half court will be a key factor. And look, when they get into their split stuff, if they do end up trapping Steph, he's going to make plays, he's going to pick them apart. But it's when he's off the ball, not in the screening action, that they're just putting his defender in help, clogging the paint, all that stuff. They've got to figure out a way to get him more involved, and he's got to knock down a couple shots. We're gonna wrap this up. The last thing I want to talk about is Jordan Poole really briefly. I know we touched on him in a little bit, but this is something we brought up earlier in the week, is just this trade-off, right? And I went through this to a degree at the end of my career as well. The trade-off of having an elite offensive player, which Jordan Poole is, and obviously didn't play well last night, an elite offensive player who is also a guy that teams are going to go after. There's that one clip where Jaylen Brown comes down in sort of a delayed transition, and literally he plays matador defense, and Jaylen Brown gets around, dunks it, and Steph, does the little hand palm, like, what are you doing, And so the trade-off with him going forward, how his minutes fluctuate game to game. I know they trust him, but he has to figure out a way to be better in his shows, to be better when he does get switched on to guys, to be better containing the ball. because he's too good offensively for him not to be on the court. Have you been targeted, by the way?
Me?
Yes.
Of course. Yes. What? Come on. Of course. You've seen it. You guys have seen it's live in action. I've been targeted for sure.
Our boy Glessner texted me when you guys played the Kings late in the season, and he was like, they're going after Tyrese every time.
Yeah,
I have a question, JJ, about you getting targeted by these two guys when you were in Philly. Is it like when you're out there, does it feel a little bit like either the spotlight is just on you? It's like you just know it's coming. Like, what's the feeling when you know that you're playing defense and all of a sudden you just see them running around trying to get the ball in a matchup that's favorable to go after, like you specifically? You played defense against a lot of guys over the years. Like, how do you feel when that's happening?
It's really disheartening. It's almost embarrassing. You know, Monty Williams calls it, you know, we got to go look for the pigeon, and being the pigeon sucks. I thought Max Strus in the Heat Celtics series did a really good job. For his whatever. That was the guy that they were targeting, and he battled and he contested shots, and I thought he did a decent job of containing the basketball. But in watching that, and in watching Duncan in past years and Tyler Hero in past years, I'm just like, you're a white shooter, man. They're just gonna you're the guy, Peyton Pritchard. They're just like, you're the guy. Come here.
That's how it goes.
Come up here. All right, Tyrese, we appreciate the insight. We'll hop back on with you, being the pigeon sucks. Later in the playoffs, always good to catch up with you, bro.
For sure.
All right, thanks as always for listening.